committed to diversity and education and to reaching out to the Latino community in such extraordinary ways. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that a great academic advisor, Rose Vega Shannon, is an absolute superstar. And let's give a round of applause for Rose. Tonight, my presentation is the past, the present, and the future. And to the graduates this spring, I commend you, and equally your parents, your family members, and tus abuelos, and family and friends who helped you to get to this most magnanimous point in your journey along the way. So first and foremost, very excited about your journey towards fully realizing a better tomorrow. And I can just imagine how your parents have to be so proud of your phenomenal contributions. Here we are at college, celebrating you, the graduates of Minneapolis Community Technical College. And so, in part, I want to talk about the past. I want to talk about the present. And when we talk about the present, I want to share with you my thoughts on what they don't teach you in college about being highly effective in the world of work. And then I want to talk about our future. So I want to be mindful of time, and yet I do know that I have a good bit of time to really touch on subject matters. You may know that the Latino community in Minnesota started in about 1860s. And at the time, there was a gentleman named Luis Garzon who was with the orchestra in Mexico. They were here in Minnesota. He actually became sick. So the orchestra went on and he stayed here. And that, I think, is really quite amazing because our community started with a great love of the full array of music. When I think about folks like Nicholas Carter, a great harpist who brings this richness, this has been a great tradition for who we are. An applause for Nick again, in the past. And I want to speak to what Minneapolis was like a very long time ago. And I can do that because my great-grandmother, Atanasio Landeros Martinez, and my grandfather's family, and my grandmother's family, the Gomez, the Ceballos, the Martinez, the Gonzalez, the Hernandez, came to Minnesota at the promise of jobs to work the sugar beet fields in the 1920s, Hector, Minnesota. And you see, the company store charged them for all the goods and services. And at the end of the season, how was it that they owed more than they made? And that happened only once to them. They said, you know what, we're not going to put up with this, forget it. So my family literally, on their own, went from Hector, Minnesota, the southern part of Minnesota, to Minneapolis. And so the Gomez family began in the 1920s in North Minneapolis. And what's interesting, when you go back and look at the records, it was a very small community. The Latino community had been a small community really up until the 1980s. And what had always eluded us was education. So this is why when I see a wonderful number of students, family, friends, and loved ones, your achievements, in part, have been paid by the work of so many Latinos for so long, for many generations, that saw the need for a better life. And in Minneapolis in particular, I can tell you, we were commenting over at the table, that our first effort to bring human services to Minnesota was in November of 1975. That's a very long time ago. And I remember because I actually was there. And we met at a library, Lori and Penn. And we recognized that if we were going to help our community, we had to help ourselves. So we organized Centro Cultural Chicano, with now known as El Centro. We honor all of the great leaders and staff, people served by El Centro for a very long period of time. That is a great organization. But back then we didn't have any human services. We had very little effort, outreach, to invite and help promote education for our community. And this is what we know. I have to say this, that my grandfather, Jesse Gomez, was a great musician. He played violin, he played bass, he played mandolin, he played with local groups in the 1930s like the Budapest Gypsies to many different shows now when they had vaudeville. But my grandfather only had a 5th grade education. But you know what? He was one of the wisest men that I ever have met. Because he understood the power of education. And he really imparted upon my family the power of education. People like Roman Gomez. Roman Gomez was the head of the graphic arts department. You know where? At Minneapolis Community Technical College. Right here. And I remember my uncle when he worked here. We had very few Latinos at the time. But what does that mean about today? Let's look at contrast from 1980 to today. 1980, we had 30,000 Latinos throughout the entire state of Minnesota. Today, there are over 200,000 Latinos throughout all of Minnesota, and we live in every one of the 87 counties, 365 days a year. And today, there are over 11 communities of Latinos. This is why at Cluas, the name of our agency, Comunidades Latinas, Unidas en Servicio, because we recognize the power of community is as strong as the power of family. But what is it that unites us? And this is a question that we've asked at Cluas for many years. And it is among our newest programs called the Learning Together program. There we're asking our parents one question. And with the parents in the room, it is a question that you are fully realizing today. And that question is this: what are your hopes and dreams for your child's future? It is the universal question of all families throughout all times. What are your hopes and dreams for your children's future? And you know what we hear at Lewis? I want my children to have a better life. It was the question that was answered by Emilio Cervantes many years ago, who told his children, Manuel, Raquel, Ramona, Jose, Ricardo, Guadalupe, I don't want you to have to work with your hands like I did. I want you to get an education. And Emilio passed away when Carmencita and her 7 children were ages 1 through 10. And this is about becoming today the president. I shared this story with a group of admissions officers of colleges, universities in Minnesota. And I said, now let me ask you a question. Carmencita had 7 children, not much of an education. And I asked those administrators of those colleges and universities, how many of you think these kids finished high school? Maybe half the hands went up. I said, how many do you think of the 7 Cervantes children, any of them went to college? And you know what? Not one hand went up. Not one. And then you know what I shared with them? In the first time in Trio's national history, a family